Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from around the world, and thank you for joining and discussing some of the main topics surrounding the second edition of the African Horizons report, which released globally last month. My name is Nick Gertner, and I'm the Director and CEO of Knight Frank Residential in South Africa. Now, the African Horizons report is a relatively new addition to the array of publications that Knight Frank puts out and aims to highlight investment opportunities and trends across the real estate markets in Africa. This specific webinar is going to focus on some of the residential aspects highlighted in the report. Now, while the report covers a large range of key themes, topics, and trends, today's discussion is focused on health and wellness living. The pandemic has resulted in a big shift in the way that people think when looking for a property, with a large focus now being on space and lifestyle available from home. People are looking for a home base that offers work from home space, relaxing outdoor spaces, and areas that they can exercise and keep a healthy lifestyle without having the necessity of leaving their homes. Many businesses have also realized that they can indeed function efficiently and effectively without having all the staff and employees working from a central office base. The feeling is that work from home trend and the desire to find a property that offers more than just a place to come home and sleep is going to last long after the pandemic has passed, with business owners gearing their businesses in such a way that allows for functionality in and away from the office. We're going to start today's webinar with an interview between Rami Harawi, who's a principal of a private investment group who develops properties around the world, and Oliver Banks, who's an accounts manager and sales executive of Knight Frank's international development team. They discuss some of the trends currently happening in development, with specific focus on Clifton Terraces, which is a luxury development in Cape Town that was headed up by Rami. He discusses the thought behind the development and details what makes it a unique offering in today's market. Following that, we're going to hold a live panel discussion where myself, Oliver Banks, Kate Everett-Allen, who is a partner in Knight Frank UK head office, and Tarquin Gross, who's head of residential agency in Kenya, discuss the current market trends and the shift in focus towards wellness living within their markets. At the end of the discussion, we'll be opening the floor to any questions that our viewers may have for our panelists, so please feel free to ask questions and post in the group chat feature, and we'll answer all your questions as best we can. I hope that you enjoy it, and thank you again for joining us. I'll now hand over to Oliver and Rami to continue with proceedings. Thank you.
My name is Oliver Banks. I work in our international residential development team at Knight Frank, and I'm delighted this morning to be joined by Rami Harawi, who is a developer of Clifton Terraces in South Africa. Good morning, Rami.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Rami, you've obviously got property interests across the globe. Why South Africa?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's for us, it was really Clifton because we're very picky about our investments, specifically in South Africa. We feel Clifton and Cape Town in general offer something that's pretty unparalleled in the world. Lifestyle-wise, access to nature, access to amazing restaurants. Chefs from all over the world are attracted to South Africa and Cape Town, especially because of the freshness of the produce, the wine region, and the diversity of the foods there. It also offers an amazing on the beach, but you're a 5 minutes drive from Table Mountain and Lion's Head or 12 Apostles. You can do a road trip through the desert up to Namibia. So for us, that altogether really made it a very interesting city to look at. And then you add on top of it the fact that, your attendees will be very familiar with the Knight Frank Wealth Report, that it's ranked either the most affordable or second most affordable city in the world when it comes to luxury property. So it made it very interesting. And then when you look at Clifton itself, the restriction, basically that it's not going to be rebuilt again. It's in such a unique area that once you build something, the properties there have staying value, they have a uniqueness to them, they have amazing views. And so we got really excited about the opportunity when we found the property to develop.
Great. And it's a beautiful country, South Africa, and as I say, clearly a good opportunity there. I think the other thing that we've seen and has been obviously quite well documented throughout the pandemic, and I'm sure something that lots of people are looking at the moment is we've seen lots of people moving around because they want to change the environment in which they live. I know we recently recently launched our global buyers survey, which I think found that 66% of people are more likely to want to find somewhere with more space. 61% of people wanted, somewhere to work post lockdown. Another 40% wanting, views next to, waterside properties and such like. Is that something that you now consider with your developments sort of moving forward, and something that's also, and with your developments that you're working on at the moment?
Definitely. I mean, it's interesting because that was in a way the premise of Clifton Terraces to begin with. We felt that there's gonna be demand for quality properties in the middle of nature, benefiting from access to an urban area without being right in the middle of it. So that was always our feeling. And Cape Town and Clifton have always benefited from that, essentially migration, whether it's people from Europe or the Middle East. Well, essentially people from Europe escaping winter, coming down for their summers, or people from the Middle East wanting to leave the extremely hot summers in the Gulf region and wanting to come to South Africa for a more mild winter. Also, you have within South Africa, a lot of people from Johannesburg, Durban, wanting to move to Cape Town. So it's always been, and across the continent as well, Nigeria, Kenya, people wanting to come and live or have a summer house, at least in Cape Town. So that was always the case. We've seen that grow substantially when it comes to, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic, we saw a lot of local demand for luxury properties when it comes to having more space, being in nature, having some privacy and alone time, essentially, especially during the lockdown periods. And also the work from home aspect of things has really kind of driven demand for more space and some serenity as well.
Nice, and you must have some pretty good views from where you are at the moment on Clifton Terraces, is that right?
Yes, I actually miss it because I'm away. I've been away since December 2019. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in the world. And if anyone's interested, we have an Instagram page you could check out. We kind of regularly post sunset views. It's objectively one of the best views I've seen.
Nice. The other thing that's obviously been spoken a lot, and it's certainly what we're finding across Europe and UK and the US at the moment. The other thing that's coming up on people's agenda when they're looking at new build developments at the moment is the detail and the finishing. Also, sustainability is another factor that I think people are looking at a lot more now. And then obviously that wellness piece. Everyone being stuck at home, been wanting to concentrate on themselves, their mental health, their physical health is obviously incredibly important. How has that impacted your sort of design and planning on this development and your future plans?
Very interesting question, because I've gone through a shift of what I consider is important to me or not, and I think a lot of us in this forum have. So as consumers as well, and you can see it with consumer demand. So if I give you a quick brief of what Clifton Terraces is, that way I could explain what we're going through right now. So Clifton Terraces essentially is like two developments in one. You have the 10 apartments on the front, and then you have two set back into the mountain. In a way, villas. They are standalone villas. They're part of the development as penthouses, but they're 1,000 square meters each, around 700 squares internal, 300 squares external, and they're perched atop the development. So you're kind of on level 7 from your living room terrace all the way to level 10 from your master bedroom. And so they're twin villas. And the reason I'm telling you this is to kind of understand the change that happened. And pre-pandemic, when we designed the first villa and fully fitted it out with interior architecture, interior decor, art, which I'm happy to talk about more. We sourced a lot of South African artisans, artists, and we wanted to celebrate a lot of the South African design and art scene. So that one, in a way, when you look at it, it's got a kind of strong language of luxury, with a little understated, with a relaxing feeling, but it still has that kind of confidence and boldness that we had pre-pandemic in a way.
Yeah.
And now I feel there's a move more towards sustainable materials, relaxed luxury, timber, comfort, and clearly with a sense of quality and feeling, but not as much boldness, and a little more kind of focused on intimacy, comfort, and in a way timelessness, if that makes sense. So that's the direction we're seeing, and that's the work we're doing on the second penthouse. That's the feeling we're heading towards, actually.
Very nice. So yeah, more about sort of, keep it in keeping with the local area whilst giving that extra bit of touch and detailing, and just sort of on the wellness side of things, as I sort of mentioned before, the importance on outside space, gyms, that sort of thing. Is that something that you've got at Clifton Terraces?
Yes. So basically, the 10 apartments aside, the 2 villas, and one of which actually just sold 3 days ago. We can proudly say that in the middle of this market, they sold, and it actually is a record-breaking price. The most recent sale at that price level was 2017 in Clifton, in Cape Town. So we're very proud of that, and it's a testament to what we've built. But so if we focus on both of them in a way as essentially twin villas, we've built them for them to have their own standalone amenities. So you walk in, you have the option whether you want a media room, wine cellar, gym, spa. We have 2 rooms ready to be fitted out the way you want it to. As an owner, you just say what you want, it will be fitted out. You have a 10-meter pool, westward facing with sunset views, and you can just sit there, lounge there, and actually kind of view Table Mountain, the 12 Apostles, and Clifton Beaches right under you. You have your own standalone master suite with an indoor-outdoor bath and shower. So you basically slide the windows open, you're outdoor on the terrace. You have a backyard as well of about 80 square meters, back area, anyway, family lounge area. If you don't feel like entertaining guests all the time, that's your more intimate space. And also what we factored in is access to Kloof Road, which is the road behind Clifton Terraces, further above. So staircase access there to give you immediate access to like running trails, Lion's Head hiking trails, and all of that. So it's very much embedded in the development. It's very much part of nature. Even the landscaping, we only went for indigenous plants that make you feel like you're part of the mountain and part of where you're living, rather than kind of make it stark and go for something else. Yeah.
I mean, the project sounds absolutely phenomenal, and what a great location, what a great country to have it in, and to have something of that quality in that location is amazing, and also the space that it offers. I'd love to come down and see it. It's a shame that we can't just yet, but hopefully soon. Rami, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you this morning, and looking forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, and great job with Knight Frank. Always read your reports. I love everything you guys report.
Cheers, Rami. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you again for joining us today, and a big thank you to Rami for sharing his incredible development with us. It really is something special if you haven't seen it yet. So we're going to move over to the panel discussion now. I've got our 3 panelists with us. We've got Tarquin, who, as I mentioned earlier, he's head of residential agency in Kenya. We've got Kate, who is based in the UK. She's a partner in the UK head office and head of research. And Oliver, who you've just met, who runs the international developments out of UK as well. So you've got a chance now, if you would like to. We've got a few questions that have already come through. Since the webinar started. You've got a chance to post any of your questions in the Q&A. We'll get to as many as we can at the moment, and if we don't get to them, we'll respond to you directly after the webinar. We've got your details, so we'll send through answers to whatever you've asked. Kate, I'm going to start off with you. One of the questions we've got, so following with the trend of obviously wellness and the way that things have changed in the last few months and the current trends, people are asking, so to what extent is wellness and well-being on buyers' minds? And then sort of coupled with that, how are buyers' attitudes changing due to the pandemic?
Okay, Thanks for inviting me on this morning, Nick. Much appreciated. So to what extent is wellness sort of on buyers' minds? I think we've got to rewind a little bit. So back in 2019, so way before the pandemic, our editor of the Wealth Report, Andrew Shirley, sort of reached out to our global network to really understand what's on the minds of ultra high net worth individuals around the world, sort of what their key concerns were. And back then, the feedback that we got from our network was this sort of desire to progress wellness, well-being, health, fitness, sort of more work-life balance, etc. And that fed into the theme of our 2020 Wealth Report. So that came out in March, so just as the pandemic was sort of starting to hit our shores. But obviously COVID has really sort of supercharged that interest in wellness and well-being. We've seen that across many of our markets, across Europe, US and Asia over the last few months. Just a couple of statistics that sort of really underline the extent to which that's happening. At the heart of the Wealth Report is our attitude survey. And within that, we take the views of around 600 wealth advisors, so they're sort of private bankers, lawyers, etc. And what we found was that they told us 79% of their clients are spending more time and money on wellness compared to previous years. And Ollie touched on his interview with Rami. He talked about our global buyer survey. And within that, we found that we asked people what the top 3 reasons for buying a new home were. And interestingly, access to good quality healthcare came second. Now that survey was done sort of this time last year, just as we were really sort of being hit by the pandemic here in the UK in particular. So I think that really underlines the extent to which people are starting to think about wellness. Just one other thing, in the webinar that we did last year in October, my colleague Victoria Garrett, who heads up our residential team in Asia, he did a similar webinar, and they asked the audience on that, when investing in residential property, how important are wellness amenities to you? 67% said very important, 33% said it was nice to have. Anybody good at maths knows that totals 100%. So not one individual said that wellness amenities were not a consideration for them. So I think that really tells us a little bit about what's happening on sort of buyers' minds over the last 12 months. In terms of how attitudes are changing, we've seen people have really sort of taken a step back over the last 12 months and sort of reassessed what they want from a home, how they want to live. And in some cases, that's just as simple as maybe moving to a property with a home office, a larger garden, those sorts of additional facilities. In other cases, I think people are looking at, if they're lucky enough to have second homes, where they want them to be. Maybe they want them to be in more easily commutable distance to their primary residence in case lockdowns and things occur in future. And if you think about what lockdowns have done, they've sort of restricted all the things that people most crave, so fresh air, views, exploration, all those key factors. I think what's critical is whether these are going to be short-term interests or whether these are actually going to be longer-term changes to the ways that we're living. Interestingly, as part of the Wealth Report, we also asked about what were the key attributes when purchasing a home. And obviously outdoor space, not surprisingly, came top. But in Asian and US cities, actually air quality was also really crucial. That's just a quick roundup really of how buyer attitudes are changing as a result of the last 12 months in the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Kate. And I think just leading on from that, I've had a question directed for you, Ollie. So they want to know sort of how have developers responded to buyer demands in a post-COVID world, and how has COVID affected the way that developers are presenting their products to clients?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously a lot of it ties into what Kate's just been talking about, but COVID gave everyone a chance to reset, as well as developers. A lot of projects were held back. We released our global developments report at the end of last year. We found that 57% of those developers had delays in their projects, and 40% of those guys saw that as an opportunity to change and tweak their developments. And yeah, it really ties into what Kate's saying. I think what we've seen is a drive towards larger units. I say back in 2014, we went through this trend of wanting much larger units, and then more recently, it's been going back to more smaller units and maximising, that space. But I think we're going to see a drive back towards, larger floor plates so that people can have the space that they desire. Obviously, the outdoor space, terraces coming back. Maybe more ground floor apartments weren't necessarily so popular, but with large gardens. But that's something that I think we'll see come back as well. The other key tweaks that we're seeing happening is there's likes of sort of sterilized surfaces being implemented in kitchens, air purifying systems going into the conditioning units, and then also that sort of drive towards sustainability. But I think one of the biggest drivers that we've probably seen is also, or changes that we've seen happen, is obviously the use of those communal spaces. So we're seeing a lot more sort of working spaces being put in, storage facilities for bikes, that sort of thing is going to become a lot more important. Changes in technology that are happening. So I think there's that this has been an opportunity for people to press reset and look at their developments and really thinking about what people want. Interestingly, we've seen a much bigger drive towards domestic demand across our markets. I think in years before COVID, developers realizing that they're at the more prime end of the market, trying to cater towards international buyers and what they want. And I think interestingly, there's been a much bigger drive towards keeping the domestic buyer happy, picking out prime locations and locations that are close to green spaces. So there's been a recent walkability study done as well, so that you can, how close you are to taking the dog for a walk to a green space, how far you are from the office, and the sort of 5-minute city really. So I think there's changes that are already happening, and more to come. In regards to the way developers are presenting their projects, of course, there's been a big spend on technology. Doing things like we're doing now, going virtual, webinars, obviously Matterport and sort of 3D walkarounds and virtual tours is something that's been a big welcome, I think, to our industry and to developers. So that's definitely going to stay around for the long haul, I think.
Thanks, Ollie. Moving on, question for Tarquin. Tarquin, the main influences changing people's buying choices, obviously the pandemic and COVID is a big one. And then how have buyers' changing choices sort of affected property prices in Kenya?
Thanks, Nick. I think obviously COVID is the big influence, but inside of that, I think Kate touched upon it a lot, is sort of people's changing perceptions and what they would like in their lifestyle. I think that working from home is become more prevalent in our time. So I think the idea of greater privacy, outdoor space, home office are your key things. And I think what we found in Kenya, or some of the offers that we're receiving on properties at the moment, is people are sort of looking for land, but not like huge tracts of land, but actually looking at the development and what that property offers them. Does it offer them, space for the family? Does it offer luxury? Does it offer, state-of-the-art infrastructure, etc.? And I find that some of the properties that we've received offers on, but more recently, have prices that I thought wouldn't be achievable, but they're getting inundated in offers. So it definitely is showing that people's, times are changing. I think also, if we talk about the pricing and how the prices are changing, with people needing more liquidity due to businesses and COVID, there's definitely been a change where we're seeing about 15% discounted on offers. So people are offering more, sellers are more willing to accept offers. We're seeing with that there's a bit more transactions happening in the market. So where things were pretty stagnant, we're definitely seeing an influx of transactions happening, offers coming in, receptive. Lettings market's been really down. I think a lot of people have sort of gone away from just leaving their rental properties vacant and bring them on the sales market with a view of actually selling, and that's helped our market. So although prices are down slightly, there's a lot more transactions and a lot of ways to invest money. So, you know, instead of just holding into a property and waiting to achieve a certain price, people are sort of more receptive to accepting an offer and then taking the investment elsewhere. So yeah, I think, you know, prices may be down slightly, but actually with more transactions, there's more options, you know, to change that investment in some way in the residential markets in Kenya.
Thanks, Tarquin. Kate, back to you. I know we've touched on this a little bit already. Question on what impact will more flexible working hours obviously have on where people want to live. I know that it's pretty much been talked about already, and I notice already in Cape Town and South Africa, people are obviously shifting out of the city and into sort of larger spaces outside of the CBD. Just in terms of trends globally, are you seeing the same thing across the board? Is it a global shift? Yeah, that's what we've been.
It's an interesting one. And I think the sort of key trends that we as researchers at Knight Frank are sort of monitoring over the next few months. One is obviously the opening of travel restrictions, because that's going to have a massive impact on some cross-border transactions, particularly at the prime level, but also this future of the office debate and sort of what the world of work is going to look like after the pandemic. And we're hearing mixed messages. So we're hearing from some corporate firms, banks, some lawyers that they're wanting people back in the office this summer. A sort of a very flat rule. But then we're also hearing a lot more flexible working for other markets. And I think the upshot is that it's not going to be a one size fits all. We're going to have a hybrid system. And I think it's probably going to vary from country to country, from industry to industry, even from city to city potentially. And I think what we've seen in Europe and the US, this race for space is what we've termed it, as buyers have sort of opted to move, in some cases, towards suburbs or rural markets. That's also leading to other trends. So we're seeing just in the last few months an uptick in activity or uptick in demand for pied-à-terres, small apartments right in the heart of the city centre. So whilst the family may have moved to, say, the countryside rural markets, actually the main breadwinner still wants to have a foothold in the city centre for midweek, overnight stays, etc. So I think obviously Cape Town, that's probably not such an issue because you can have the best of both worlds. You've obviously got coastal living, rural parts, but you can get into the city centre relatively quickly. But that's certainly a theme that we're seeing in the likes of New York and you know, other big cities. I think what we might see also once corporates really clarify what their working from home strategy is going to be, we may then see a sort of second flurry of activity as homeowners feel more confident in making that move, either in purchasing a second home or maybe even moving out their primary residence further afield, once they know that they can potentially do maybe a 2-day week rather than a 5-day commute. So that might be coming down the line in the next few months. And just touching on what Ollie said, really, that this demand that we've seen, this uptick in activity, and it has been quite phenomenal in some markets, the US, UK, Canada, Australia, we've seen a real uptick in sales volumes. That's just been domestic. So we haven't seen yet that interest from international demand. So I think this future of the office is really going to be critical to where people look to purchase over time. So that's, a quick roundup.
Thanks, Kate. Tarquin, I'm just going to pass one on back to you. It's quite a broad question. But what do you think the future of residential markets in Kenya will look like as a result of the changes that have been happening?
I think generally from, you know, a developer's point of view, we've seen probably in Q1 a sort of wait and see look from developers, just taking stock of the situation and what the pandemic has done. But I think actually we're going to see a huge resurgence in the residential markets in Kenya. I've spoken a little bit about, I think over the last 3 years, transaction being a bit stagnant, sellers not willing to take offers, buyers not really coming up, and it's sort of stagnant. And I think with the changes that we spoke about earlier, I think that's only going to be a positive effect on the residential market, and things are going to look to improve as we come out of this. The last year and a half has sort of been a bit of a dampener on everyone, and I think people have the opinion to move on and to start the process. We've seen, for example, the coastal and upcountry markets, the ideas of people looking for more space or second homes. We've seen a much greater inquiries, and that sort of area is really driving demand internally. Like I was saying, in the last couple of months, we've seen offers coming in on big properties and actually at very good prices. So I think, as there might have been a reduction in the sales market in Kenya over the last few years, but I think as we come out of this over the 21, probably 22, I think we'll start seeing more transactions, increase of prices, and I think whilst maybe we won't see I think the prices will probably remain the same, and in the past they weren't being achieved. Now that they're a bit less, so as we go on, I think we'll start seeing more and more those prices being achieved, and maybe slightly more, maybe see a bit, people getting enthusiastic about properties together, and that sort of driving prices, but not necessarily higher asking prices. So I think in general in Kenya, I'm really enthusiastic and excited to what 2021 and beginning of 22 holds for us.
Also, sorry, just on the chat, I've also seen one of the other questions that are sort of related. You mentioned earlier that there was increased in interest in Kenya residential market. They want to know, do customers prefer buying the property, or is there also a preference towards leasing or renting a property? What are you seeing more of at the moment?
It's a really interesting question, because funnily enough, only yesterday I was talking to a prospective, it was a buyer, but someone who lived abroad, had business interests in Kenya, and was talking to me about the fact that he'd been looking at the rental market and couldn't find what he was looking for. And so it sort of changed his perspective and thought, actually, you know what, maybe it's the right time to buy. So I think, whilst in Kenya, we've always had a very good expat community or multinationals posting people into Kenya, and that's sort of driven the rental market. We don't know what the future holds for these companies, and whether, we'll see more part-time people coming for 6 months. And so maybe your serviced apartments markets will be better. But I think generally people who've got interest in Kenya actually might come towards looking at buying. And so that's why your developers, from listening to Rami, those developers looking to take on the health and well-being and driving that, I think are going to be, the future actually. And I think in Kenya, I think we're going to see more and more people look to buy rather than rent, because, they've got more long-term prospects in Kenya. And I think we're going to see, as I was saying, markets improving in Kenya over the next couple of years. And so they'll see that as a good investment.
Great. And then just moving on to Ollie. Sorry, a question just came through just regarding sustainability on developments. What role does sustainability play in future planning of cities and residential developments in particular?
Yeah, I think it's huge, to be honest with you, Nick. I think, a lot of what we've spoken about today has been the drive towards, one of the factors that we've obviously seen happening is people leaving the cities. And that's happened across Europe, across many markets. And I think that will change. I think people will have to come back to the city. And that is largely down to sustainability as well, because, there's lots of quotas that obviously governments are putting in place at the moment they need to hit. And it is far more sustainable to live in a city. I think sort of about 35% more sustainable to live in a city. And I think that the way that cities are looked at, Kate's touched on offices and what they're going to look like in the future, but also what the high streets look like. I saw that Debenhams on Oxford Street have just put in, planning to change sort of 350,000 square foot of retail space into a mixed-use development, and that is going to be mostly co-working, residential with a bit of retail, and I think that's going to have a huge impact in the way that the city looks in the future, and developers are going to have to react to that. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what it looks like going forward. But I think that interest definitely is going to come back towards our great cities around the world, and I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later. So let's see what happens.
Kate, someone's asking, is there any research or evidence showing how property design contributes to physical and mental well-being? Have you touched on that at all?
Yeah, we did actually. So in the attitude survey that I mentioned earlier in the Wealth Report, we asked that question, and actually I think it was something like 51% of respondents said that they thought there was a direct link to a property's design and their physical and mental well-being. And actually the link was strongest. We break it down by world region, and actually Asian ultra high net worth individuals had the biggest correlation between the two. They thought something like 60% felt that there was a strong link. And I think that we know ourselves that if you've got natural light, good ventilation, access to greenery and outdoor space, you do feel better. We've had some long dark winters here in the UK over the last few months, and instantly that sense of well-being returns the moment you can access sort of the great outdoors, and you've got some sort of some sense of ability to move around and have space. I think that's critical. But I also think connectivity is really key. So there was a study done by Harvard University, and they found that loneliness and social isolation can have more of an impact on your health than obesity. So you're 30% more likely to have a heart attack or a stroke as a result of loneliness and social isolation. I think that's quite fascinating. I think we're probably going to see that developers will start to prioritise those communal areas where people can perhaps socialise and have that social contact. I think that's going to be more and more critical over the next few years. We also found in our global buyer survey that there was more of a preference to have secondary accommodation when purchasing a property, so that if you think about the last few months with lockdown, elderly parents have been quite isolated, and they've been a sort of key demographic that people have been concerned about. The option to be able to have them either in an annex or if you're lucky enough to have a small property within your estate or near to your home, I think is quite a big factor for many people who have missed having that sort of contact with extended family. So I think we will see that over the next few months. And I think it's going to be a challenge really for developers. If you think about the sort of lead time for a number of these projects, often you're trying to predict trends and preferences amongst buyers maybe 4 or 5 years before a development comes to fruition. So that I think is where the challenge is going to lie for the development industry going forwards, and working out what are the trends that we've seen as a result of the pandemic are just short-term concerns and which ones are sort of here to stay. I think that's going to be the key issue.
Thanks, Kate. We've got a question sort of leading on from design for Tarquin. Just a simple one. Do you think that due to the pandemic, there's going to be more of a demand now for townhouses rather than apartments due to the shift of people obviously wanting more space and a bit of outdoor space?
In a nutshell, yes. But I still, the apartments is an affordable way to get onto the property ladder. So they're always going to be, a demand for apartments. But I think generally for lifestyle and some of the things that we've discussed, wellness and the amenities that some of these townhouses, apartments offer the amenities and stuff, but also developers developing townhouses are now offering them as well. But I would say that recently going on what we've seen in the last 6 months, there's definitely been a shift of people looking at townhouses as purchases rather than apartments. But I wouldn't say that, there isn't still going to be a market for apartments. But I'd say, townhouses probably on people's minds at the moment because of the pandemic.
Thanks very much. We're going to get to just a couple more questions because we are going to wrap up in a few minutes' time. One for Ollie. Oliver, where do you feel that the investment opportunities lie in developments over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think for us, we've seen lots of people relocating at this time, and not just where they are in their own country, but looking at other locations where they might want to spend time. There's been a big drive towards this co-primary residence as well, which is another sort of key term that keeps on popping up at the moment. So someone might have a space in London or might have a space in Lisbon, because they probably want some time in the sunshine and the nice healthy lifestyle. But another market that we've seen a lot of interest in over the past few months, and people relocating, is a lot of the German market. So your Frankfurts and your Berlins, having that access to healthcare and good schooling there is on people's hit list. It's again also quite affordable, those markets, and it's in a what is a very strong economy in the German market. So there's going to be, I think there's a big drive towards these sort of safe haven locations at the moment. So yeah, your likes of New York has been doing very, very well in recent months. London's also another market that's come under a lot of pressure over the past few years, and we've seen, I think we're going to see a big year for London in 2021, 2022. So yeah, it's a question that I'm getting asked a lot at the moment, but I think these sort of key safe haven countries are going to do very, very well. I think there's a lot of investors at the moment circling around, assuming that a lot of these markets are going to have a cooling off period. I think we all thought that might happen as a result of COVID, but knowing what some research that Kate did, and Kate will probably correct me here, but I think overall across all markets, we saw on average an increase of 1.9%. Is that right, Kate, or have I got that wrong?
Well done. Glad to hear you reading the research.
Good. So that hasn't happened, and I don't see that happening now. Those markets are being fueled by domestic interest and people moving around, and I think we're now going to go through a period where people are going to be able to take to the skies very soon, and international interest and is going to really fuel a lot of markets across the world. So I think now's a good time as ever if you are looking to invest in property. I think we're in a good place at the moment.
So one more question coming through for you. You touched on it a little bit with the townhouses and apartments. Someone asking whether there's any specific preference in type of house that people are buying between apartments, freestanding homes, townhouses, and is there a specific location within Kenya that is in high demand at the moment, and what is sort of looking to sort of increase the most in the foreseeable future?
So I can only go on what I'm seeing in the last 6 months, and I think it'd be unfair to predict, in too much of the future. But one of the areas that we have seen in the last couple of months is your sort of Karen, Imbagati Ridge, Windy Ridge areas. Now, it's hard to this is where we've seen that sort of very high-end property that was developed and has been getting quite a lot of interest on it. And it goes away from, huge pieces of land and more towards like a very state-of-the-art development, with highly engineered fittings throughout. So I think, typically, I think why Karen offers a bit more is that people still want the space, the ability to sort of have a lovely garden. A lot of the zoning areas in Karen are still 1 acre, while on the other side of town it's sort of half acre. So you can still get a nice piece of land, and there's quite beautiful houses. So I think typically due to the pandemic, I think Karen is seeing a bit of an increase or an interest from buyers because of the space. But I think generally it's sort of people are looking more at the house and what it offers them as a family. The spare room for your elderly family, or if it's an international buyer somewhere where friends and family can come and stay, and then also the garden offering space for the children, and that sort of extra lifestyle, especially if you're working from home a lot more. It just gives that sort of, extra lifestyle that I think we're starting to see that people are looking for.
Then we've got another question just regarding purchasing property. I mean, in South Africa, Cape Town specifically, where I am, there's a decent amount of cash buyers, but a lot of homes are still being financed. We've had a reduction in interest rates to try and stimulate spending throughout the pandemic. But I understand, obviously, finance, mortgaging throughout Africa has been a bit of an issue due to the high interest rates. And in Kenya, what is your what has been happening? Is most of the purchasing happening cash? Are people mortgaging? And what is the predominant driver there?
Predominantly, it is cash. The mortgage market is quite a small percentage of our market. There is always talk of this might change, and mortgage rates might come down. At the moment, they fluctuate, but it can be anywhere from 13 to 17%. So, if people do take a mortgage, it's quite a while. So, for example, if with my experience in Europe, you'll take a mortgage for 30 years, while in Kenya, if you borrow the money, you'll be looking to pay it off in a much shorter time. So there's still definitely a mortgage market, but typically most of the purchases we see are from cash buyers and buyers looking for the ability to, if they do borrow if they do borrow the money from the bank, the idea to have an exit strategy as well from it. So interest rates are a lot higher than most other countries, so that's why that desire is there, and why people will try and pay cash if possible.
And Kate, that's obviously you've seen very different in more developed first world countries. I mean, mortgage rates are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum.
The fact that mortgage rates in so many advanced nations are currently at sort of record lows is quite a big driver of some of the activity that we've seen, that ability to access sort of cheap finance. We've seen, I've just put out this week actually our Los Angeles focus report, where we sort of used some data from our partners in the US, Douglas Elliman. And one of the things that they found in Los Angeles is that the proportion of cash buyers, which is normally relatively high, has really fallen over the last few months, just because the 30-year fixed rate has come down so much. So it's quite a big influencer.
I'm afraid we're gonna have to wrap it up there. We are running out of time. I just want to thank our panelists again. Thanks, Kate, Oliver, and Tarquin for joining. I think we've got some really useful and valuable information out of it. And thank you to everyone who has actually joined and listened in, participated. I really appreciate it. If we haven't got through to all of your questions, I know there are quite a few that we still haven't managed to answer. We will get back to you in the next day or two. So don't worry about that. But thank you very much for your time. And yeah, look forward to chatting to all of you soon.
Thanks, Nick.
Yes, thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.